The sound of a single footstep echoed through the suddenly quiet street. Blood trickled from Michael's knuckles as he stood between the terrified woman and the three young men who now backed away slowly, their earlier bravado evaporating into the cool evening air. If you've ever wondered what true courage looks like in an ordinary person, stay with me for this incredible story. And if it moves you like it moved me, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of the everyday heroes walking among us. Michael Chen never considered himself a hero. At 42, his life revolved around two things: his 11-year-old daughter Lily and the small bookstore he'd managed to keep afloat despite the digital revolution that had claimed so many similar businesses. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, he'd learned to navigate the complex world of single parenthood with a quiet determination that earned him respect from neighbors and customers alike. That Tuesday evening had begun like any other. Michael closed the bookstore at 7, his mind already planning the simple pasta dinner he would make for Lily, who was staying at a friend's house for a study session. The streets of Westbrook were relatively quiet as he walked toward the parking garage 2 blocks away, the setting sun casting long shadows between the buildings. He first heard the laughter, sharp and cruel, before he saw them. 3 young men, probably in their early 20s, had formed a semicircle around a woman pressed against the wall of a closed cafe. Even from a distance, Michael could see the fear in her eyes as she clutched her purse to her chest, her gaze darting between the men and the empty street beyond. "Come on, just have a drink with us," one of them said, his voice carrying in the evening air. "Why you gotta be so stuck up?" "I said no, please let me pass," the woman replied, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. Michael felt something shift inside him. Later, he would tell Lily it wasn't bravery that made him change direction and walk toward the group. It was the simple knowledge that he couldn't walk away. Not when he thought about what he would want someone to do if Lily were in that situation someday. "Everything okay here?" Michael asked, his voice calmer than he felt as he approached. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The woman's filled with hope, the men's with annoyance. "Mind your own business, old man," said the tallest of the 3, a muscular guy with a sleeve of tattoos. "We're just having a conversation." Michael noticed how the woman tried to step away, only to have one of the men shift to block her path. He recognized her now, Emma Reyes, a nurse who had once helped Lily when she'd fallen off her bike near the park. She had been kind then, patient with Lily's tears and gentle with her scraped knee. "Emma," Michael said, acknowledging her with a nod. "Are these guys bothering you?" Before she could answer, the tattooed man stepped forward, invading Michael's personal space. "I said mind your own business. What are you going to do about it anyway?" Michael wasn't a fighter. The last time he'd been in any kind of physical altercation was in high school, nearly 25 years ago. He was of average height and build, with reading glasses usually perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers from handling books all day. Nothing about him suggested he was capable of what happened next. "I'm asking you to let her go," Michael said, his voice dropping lower. "She clearly doesn't want your company." The second man, shorter but stockier than the first, laughed. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" "No," Michael replied. "I'm going to stand right here until she walks away safely." The third man, who had been quiet until now, pushed Emma roughly against the wall. "This is getting boring. Let's just take her purse and—" Michael didn't let him finish. Years of shelving heavy books had given him stronger arms than his appearance suggested. His fist connected with the third man's jaw with a sickening crack, sending him stumbling backward. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The street went completely silent. Even the distant traffic noise seemed to fade away as the 3 young men stared in shock at their friend, now sitting on the pavement with blood trickling from his split lip. The tattooed man recovered first, lunging at Michael with a roar of anger. But Michael was operating on pure instinct now, fueled by a protective rage he hadn't known he possessed. He sidestepped the charge, using the man's momentum to push him off balance. As the man stumbled, Michael delivered a sharp blow to his kidney area, causing him to double over in pain. The second man hesitated, looking between his two friends and Michael, who now stood with his fists raised, breathing heavily but steady on his feet. Emma had managed to slip away from the wall and was now behind Michael, her phone in her hand, already connected to emergency services. "Police are on their way," she said, her voice stronger now. The second man helped his tattooed friend straighten up. "This isn't worth it," he muttered, backing away. "Come on, let's go." The three retreated down the street, the tattooed one pointing back at Michael with a threatening gesture. "This isn't over," he called out, but the threat sounded hollow as they disappeared around the corner. And that's when Michael's hands began to shake. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation was ebbing away, leaving him lightheaded and nauseous. He leaned against the cafe wall, suddenly aware of the pain in his knuckles where the skin had split. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, moving to his side. Michael nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Are you?" he finally managed. "Thanks to you," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." The police arrived minutes later, taking statements from both Michael and Emma. One of the officers, an older man with salt and pepper hair, clapped Michael on the shoulder. "Not many people would have done what you did," he said. "Most would have walked on by or just called us. By then, who knows what might have happened." Michael shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone should do." "But not what everyone would do," the officer replied. "That's the difference." After the police left, promising to look for the three men based on the descriptions provided, Emma insisted on treating Michael's injured hand. They walked to a nearby all-night pharmacy where she purchased antiseptic and bandages, then sat with him on a bench outside to clean the cuts. "You're good at this," Michael commented as she worked. Emma smiled. "Nurse, remember? Though usually my patients aren't heroes who just saved me from being robbed or worse." Michael felt his face grow warm. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad who owns a bookstore." "A dad?" Emma asked, securing the bandage. "Yeah, I have a daughter. Lily. She's 11. And her mother?" Michael's expression shifted. "Cancer. 3 years ago." Emma's hands stilled for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must be hard, raising her alone." "We manage," Michael replied. "What about you? Do you have family here?" Emma shook her head. "I moved here for the job at Memorial Hospital 2 years ago. My family's all back in Arizona. I'm still trying to build a life here, make connections." She finished with his hand and packed up the remaining supplies. "It's been lonely, sometimes." There was something in her voice that resonated with Michael, the same quiet loneliness he'd been carrying since losing his wife. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily's friend's mother, asking if he was on his way to pick up Lily. "I have to go," he said, standing up. "My daughter's waiting." Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course." Michael hesitated, then pulled out one of his bookstore business cards. "If you ever want to talk, or maybe need a book recommendation." He trailed off, suddenly feeling awkward. Emma took the card, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'd like that. I love reading, but I haven't had much time lately with my shifts." "Well, books are good company when you're feeling lonely," Michael said. "And the store has a pretty comfortable reading nook if you ever want to just sit and escape for a while." "I might take you up on that," Emma replied. As Michael walked away, heading toward his car to pick up Lily, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a lightness in his chest, a sense of possibility. The evening had begun with violence and fear, but somehow ended with a connection, however tentative. When he arrived at Lily's friend's house, his daughter took one look at his bandaged hand and her eyes widened. "Dad, what happened?" Michael considered how to explain. I helped someone who needed help, he said simply. Lily studied his face, then nodded solemnly. Like Mom always said we should. Exactly like that, Michael agreed, his throat tightening at the mention of his late wife. Always help if you can. The next morning, Michael opened the bookstore as usual, trying to ignore the soreness in his hand as he arranged a new display of mystery novels. The bell above the door jingled around noon, and he looked up to see Emma standing there, looking slightly nervous in scrubs, clearly on her lunch break from the hospital. I thought I'd take you up on that book recommendation, she said. Michael smiled. Any particular genre you enjoy? Surprise me, Emma replied. I trust your judgment. Over the next few weeks, Emma became a regular at the bookstore. Sometimes she'd just browse quietly during her breaks, other times, she'd sit in the reading nook with a cup of tea from the small station Michael had set up for customers. Occasionally, she'd bring lunch for both of them, and they'd talk about books, their lives, their dreams. Lily took to Emma immediately, especially when she discovered the nurse shared her passion for astronomy. Soon, Emma was joining them for dinner once a week, helping Lily with her science homework or bringing her medical journals with interesting articles about space medicine. 3 months after that night on the street, the police called Michael to inform him that all 3 men had been arrested for similar harassment incidents. They wanted him to testify at their hearing, to establish a pattern of behavior. I don't know if I can do that, Michael told Emma that evening as they closed up the bookstore together. Face them again, I mean. Emma put down the book she was reshelving and turned to him. You know what I remember most about that night? Not those men, not the fear. I remember the moment you stepped between me and them. How the whole street went silent, like the world was holding its breath. Michael looked down at his hand, the scars from his split knuckles now faded to thin white lines. I was terrified, he admitted. I kept thinking about Lily, how she needed me to come home. But you still stayed, Emma said softly. That's what courage is, Michael. Being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The day of the hearing, Michael sat in the courtroom with Emma beside him and Lily waiting outside with a friend. When called to testify, he spoke clearly about what he had witnessed and his intervention. The judge, a stern woman with piercing eyes, listened attentively. During cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to paint Michael as an aggressor who had overreacted to harmless flirtation. Mr. Chen, did my clients actually touch Ms. Reyes before you assaulted them? The attorney asked. Michael met his gaze steadily. They blocked her path, pushed her against a wall, and threatened to take her purse. They created a situation where she was trapped and afraid. Physical touch isn't the only form of assault. The judge nodded slightly at this, making a note. When the hearing concluded, the 3 men were bound over for trial on multiple charges related to several incidents. As Michael, Emma, and Lily left the courthouse, a local news reporter approached them. Mr. Chen, can we get a statement about your heroic actions that night? Michael shook his head. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone in trouble. The reporter persisted. But many people wouldn't have intervened. What made you different? Michael looked down at Lily, who was watching him with proud eyes, then at Emma, whose hand had found its way into his. I guess I believe we're all responsible for each other, he said finally. And I want my daughter to grow up in a world where people look out for one another. The story made the local news that evening, and by the next day, Michael's bookstore was busier than it had been in years. People came in not just to buy books but to shake his hand, to tell him how his actions had inspired them to be more courageous in their own lives. A year later, Michael stood in the bookstore, now expanded into the vacant space next door to include a small cafe run by Emma, who had reduced her nursing hours to pursue this new passion. Lily sat at one of the tables, helping younger children with a reading program Michael had started for the community. Emma came to stand beside him, slipping her arm around his waist. Penny for your thoughts? Michael smiled. I was just thinking about how one moment can change everything. If I had walked a different route that night, or left the store a few minutes earlier or later. But you didn't, Emma said. You were exactly where you needed to be. Michael nodded, watching as Lily laughed with the children. We all were. The bell above the door jingled, and they turned to see the police officer who had responded that night walk in with his family. He waved at Michael and Emma before browsing the shelves. You're regular? Emma asked him. Please, he replied with a smile. And whatever my wife and kids want. As Emma moved to prepare his usual black coffee, Michael reflected on how that single moment of courage had rippled outward, touching not just his life but so many others. The bookstore had become more than a business. It was a community hub where people connected, shared stories, and found inspiration. Later that evening, after closing, Michael, Emma, and Lily walked home together through the same streets where everything had changed. As they passed the spot where Michael had confronted the three young men, Lily asked, Dad, were you scared that night? Michael exchanged a glance with Emma before answering honestly. Terrified. Then why did you do it? Lily persisted. Michael thought for a moment. Because being part of a community means sometimes you have to stand up, even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. Lily nodded, processing this. I think that's what makes you a hero, Dad. Not that you weren't scared, but that you did it anyway. Michael squeezed her hand, then Emma's. Maybe the real heroism is in the small choices we make every day, to be kind, to help others, to stand up for what's right. Those choices define who we are more than any single dramatic moment. As they continued walking, the street lamps casting long shadows behind them, Michael realized that the silence that had fallen over the street that night wasn't just about fear or shock. It was the sound of a turning point, a moment when one person's choice to act rather than look away changed the trajectory of many lives. And in that change was a lesson worth sharing, that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage, that communities are built one brave action at a time, and that sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to walk past someone in need. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We believe in the power of stories to inspire courage and compassion in all of us. Together, we can create a world where streets fall silent not out of fear, but out of respect for those who stand up for what's right.